Good evening, Miss Deirdre. I got it right today. Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Let's Talk Show here on UrbanCast. I'm Jack, and tonight we have a special guest with us, Miss Deirdre Fuller, owner of Fuller Law Firm, joining us to break down the four constitutional amendments on Louisiana's March 29, 2005 election ballot coming up this Saturday. Understanding these amendments is crucial because they could impact everything from the judicial system to taxes and government spending. We want you to be a part of the conversation. So drop your questions. If you have some questions in the comments, of course, we definitely encourage you to share the feed and ask any question. That's the most important. Good evening there, Ms. Fuller. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me on this evening.
Oh, yeah, anytime, anytime. Um, yeah, there's a lot of concerns about the constitutional amendments, and we wanted to reach out to someone to help us understand that. And my understanding is we've had a very low turnout in early voting, and I bet the mail-in ballots are probably just as bad. You know what I mean? But it's really important that folk get out there and go vote and vote for these constitutional amendments one way or the other. You know what I mean? Or we might end up something that we that some of you might not like. You understand what I'm saying?
That's very true.
Yeah, yeah. So for those who first, before I jump down in the question, tell us a little bit about who you are and you from Alexandria and all that kind of good stuff, what you do and all that kind of good stuff, if you don't mind.
Born and raised here in Alexandria. I've been a practicing attorney for about almost 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
My firm is downtown at 602 Murray Street,
Mm-hmm.
right across from the community college and directly across from the Alexandria City Utility Office. But I'm also the Rapides Parish Chief Public Defender, and I've been in that position approaching 9 years and about a month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So, we defend people who cannot afford lawyers, so
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're tasked with doing. So I do both of those jobs on a daily basis.
Oh, well, that's a whole nother story. We need to get you back on the show and talk about the public defender's office. That now I'm glad I'm writing that down. So I'm gonna call you back again. we're gonna,
Not a problem. Not a
we're gonna
problem.
we're gonna talk about it because that's something that's extremely important as well. Um, but for those who may not be familiar, can you explain, Deirdre, uh, what is a constitutional amendment and why these ballot measures are so important?
Well, when you think about the Constitution, you should think about it as guardrails because that's basically what it is.
Hmm.
It stops the government from overreaching.
Hmm.
It's supposed to ensure your, civil rights, make sure your rights are not violated. But it's a way to protect the citizens, whether we're talking about the Louisiana Constitution or the Constitution for the federal government. The whole purpose of those amendments, they're designed to add to the protection of the citizens in which it serves, basically, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, okay. And so those are things that are very, 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 and we're going to dive down into some of them in a few minutes and talk about exactly why they are so important. How do
Yes.
amendments like these get on the ballot, and why should voters take the time to research them before heading to the polls?
Well, you should always know what you're voting for or
Hmm.
not. Educate yourself before you go and cast your ballot. But the way they get on that ballot, the people that you elect to the legislator, they pass bills, and if they get a 2/3 vote, then whatever it is they're advocating for gets put on your ballot. The thing about what's going on now, this is a March election. There are
Hmm.
basically five things on this ballot: these four constitutional amendments and your clerk of court position. So it was designed intentionally to be placed on the ballot this time around because I'm just convinced the legislators knew that this would be a low turnout because this is not, presidential. They're not voting for legislators, senators, or anything of that nature. So
Hmm.
the turnout is low. So when you want to get something passed, that you may be not wanting the public to really pay attention to or know what they're doing, you put it on a ballot where you anticipate a low turnout. And these amendments in particular, are such amendments.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I know you hit the nail right on the head about the low turnout because I'm talking to so many people who don't even realize that we even have a clerk of court and one police juror. For the folk over in the Pineville area,
Correct.
they actually have a police juror that they are voting for the remaining term on. And then over on our side of the river, a lot of people have no earthly idea that this election is about to happen, and it's really
In
not a good.
addition to that, the voting for folks in Alexandria who voted early, who normally are used to going to the courthouse to vote,
Mm-hmm.
the voting place was changed to Ford Street. People didn't pay that any attention. If you weren't paying attention, you would have missed that.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
in the Kinetics building. I voted Saturday, and then when I entered the building, I may have seen 3 people,
Mm-hmm.
and that was about maybe like right before lunch. So I know the turnout is low, and as you already mentioned, mail-in ballots. I can't even imagine if 100 or 200 people took the time to mail in a ballot.
Right, right, right. Well, I know the after Saturday, on the first day of early voting, you had only 299 people voted over in
Correct.
Pineville, and right at, let's just say, about 200 over here. So we were, almost just 500 people out of 80 some odd thousand people who are eligible to vote. And my understanding is it didn't pick up throughout the week, and so it's going to be something so major going to be selected by so few number of people.
And you can best believe the folks who are pushing these amendments, they've educated the folks they want to be educated about it for them to go out and cast their ballots. The
Hmm.
remaining folks who have not taken the opportunity to learn what these amendments would or would not do simply won't vote. And lo and behold, you'll find yourself, as you just stated, stuck with something you may not want.
I'm gonna go off message just a little bit here, but a couple of years, I think it was in 2017, where it was a constitutional amendment number 2, the unanimous jury. Uh,
Correct.
and we did what was necessary to get out there and get those folk to realize what that meant. A vote in favor of that thing, what it meant. But what I don't see is, I don't see that same fervor all the time when we're dealing with these type of we leave it in the hands, and it's almost as if sometimes, Ms. Fuller, that it's by design, even on the people who's supposed to be opposing something, or going to go just the opposite of it. It's like they've bought into it too, because they don't go get out there and go seek the resources necessary, to actually engage people, go up and above, just like the other side is possibly doing on a vote. They're getting out there and they educating their people to get out there and go vote. Well, the other side just kind of like, you know, they leave it to traditional stuff. They don't get out here and really pound the pavement. And that's something that, as you know that I see constantly, that we don't do a whole lot to try to engage, and that
And
kind of
I agree with that. I'm old school. I,
thing.
I don't get my news from social media. I
Hmm.
do watch the news. I do read. I read on my iPhone. I read national news. I read local news. But that's just the way I do it. For
Hmm.
those folks who only the younger generation who don't take the time to do that because they see it as just that old school. If
Hmm.
you're not engaged, if someone is not engaged on these media sites to let them know what's going on, for the most part, they have no idea. They have no idea the
Yeah,
things that are affecting them.
and I think just like we take the time to 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 bring things up on a traditional model. Um, and let's just face it, things are changing right now, you know,
Correct.
and I think leadership has a responsibility to realize that and say, you know, we've got to tap into these new channels, or we're gonna come up on the short end of the stick, because the largest part of the electorate now is the millennial voters,
Absolutely.
and we do not court them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Right, right. And it's clear, it's clear, Ms. Fuller, they don't seem to care about the radio, and they don't care about the television. And so we as leaders, you gotta do what we need to do to make sure we engage in them and meet them where they are. You know what I mean?
You know, in the church, they tell you meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very true. You have to meet people where they are. And
Mm-hmm.
your age group is younger. They do things differently from the way we did it, but you have to meet them where they are and
That's right.
provide the information and the data to them.
Right, right. Well, you know, hey, we're trying to do our little part with it, you know. But I think the folk who are in charge of campaigns, you know, in charge of making sure they get the word out, they've got to start looking at the non-traditionals. I mean, I'm still engaged on both sides, but honestly, you know, and I'm not just saying it because I'm on this, you know, on this farm and this farm basically only, but we made this choice because we saw where people were going and we knew it, and so we're out here. So let's jump on that. Amendment number one. What
Yes.
Amendment one would explicitly grant the Louisiana Supreme Court authority over out of state lawyers and allow the legislature to create specialized courts. What are the potential benefits and concerns of this change if you know?
I don't see any benefit because what folks don't know and probably don't understand, Louisiana already has the Supreme Court already has the authority to discipline lawyers. It doesn't matter where they're from, whether the lawyers from Timbuktu or from Louisiana. If they come here and they are unethical, they can be disciplined by our Louisiana Supreme Court. Now, here's the thing, and that's why I tell you it's important for people to pay attention. This First Amendment, specialty trial courts and out of state lawyers. Well, most folks are going to get stuck on the part where, oh, I think it's a great idea to discipline out of state lawyers. We can already do that. The meat of this amendment is the first part, specialty trial courts. And what's going to end up happening? We already have specialty courts like for drug court, veterans court, mental health court, but they're talking about things like oil and gas, big money things, insurance. And what that would mean is that folks would have to travel to these courts because you probably are not going to have them in little places like Alexandria. So if you're in Alexandria and Monroe, I can see a situation where this quote unquote new specialty court for, I'm just going to use insurance as an example, would be located in Baton Rouge in New Orleans. Well, that's an additional cost to litigants to have to travel to try to
Mm-hmm.
get there. You don't know how that court operates because you don't know the lawyers in that area. You
Mm-hmm.
may end up having to find someone in that area to represent you rather than someone that you know here who you might have a relationship with. And
Mm-hmm.
as far as the judges are concerned, there again, it's not your homegrown. So when you're talking about a specialty court, ask yourself, what's the purpose of the court? These specialty courts that I'm thinking that they're trying to create, it's just for the benefit of those who have more financial wherewithal than the average citizen. Plain and simple.
Hmm. So, if passed, how might this? And I think you kind of already answered this question. You know, if passed, how might it this amendment impact people seeking legal representation in Louisiana? And the answer to that is point blank and said, if you don't have access to monetary resources, you could be just out of luck.
Correct. Correct. If you don't have the ability to use your hometown resources,
Uh huh.
your hometown lawyers who you may have developed relationships with, you know, those are the things that are important. And none of that is provided, no protection for any of that is provided in this amendment. So I'm thinking, you know, the folks who are in the legislature, there again, you have to understand, these folks are the folks who have the big dollars. They represent the constituents who lobby them for these type things. Those lobbyists are paid big dollars to get these courts up and running. How does that benefit any of us if I have to leave Alexandria because I have an insurance issue? Say another Katrina happened and my house was blown away, and I'm trying to go through the insurance process of, you know, making them pay. But the only way I can do that is through quote unquote a specialty court. And I'm not saying what type of courts they're trying to develop, because I don't think they've given us a clear answer on that. Maybe they don't want us to know. But sure enough, if they have the opportunity for us to go to the ballot and say, okay, good idea, let's develop some specialty courts. God only knows what type of court it would be, and for what purpose, and located where. You don't know that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, right now, the majority of judges in the state of Louisiana are elected, as opposed
Correct?
to in a scenario like this, they would have to be appointed, right?
Probably so. I can't say that for sure, but that's what I'm thinking will end up happening.
Uh-huh. So you'd have a court system that's stacked by X, and
Correct. Big money. Big money. But
okay,
that, call it what it is. Call
call
it
it
what
what
it
it is.
is.
All right. All right. Amendment number 2 proposes to change the Louisiana tax system, including lowering the income tax rates, adjusting property tax exemption. How might this amendment affect everybody, especially those residents right here in Alexandria and central Louisiana?
Now think about this for a second. You're
Mhm.
talking about taking the tax system and overhauling it. Well, that's 109 pages that I'm guessing. And you want to put it into a single ballot measure. How is that even possible for people to understand what they're voting on? I wouldn't understand it. You wouldn't understand it. Because when you're talking about condensing the tax system to make it understandable on a ballot for a person to pull a lever to determine yay or nay, I just don't see how you can even do that. There's so many things that will go unexplained in what that would really do. I couldn't even tell you sitting here how that could possibly benefit anyone. But I know that probably what's going to happen, you're going to have some Jindal style measure. We went off the cliff when Jindal was the governor. And I think we're going to do the same thing if we try to eliminate some things. I think one of the proposals of this is that it eliminates educational funds, property tax exemptions for hospitals and schools. I mean, just a menagerie of things. How do you possibly put all of that into one small measure on the ballot for people to make an informed decision about how this will impact them? So for me to even give you an educated answer, it's difficult for me to do. So you know you can't get that from a ballot measure.
Mm.
Too many things are included.
Wow. A portion of this amendment involves using the surplus funds for teacher retirement. And, as we know, teachers are underpaid. You know what I mean? Retirement debt and a permanent pay raise. What does this mean for educators and the state finances in the long term?
Do not be fooled. This is not a teacher pay raise. If they wanted to give teachers a pay raise, they would have done just that. This is not to give them a pay raise. They're looking at various funds, and when I say funds, various pools of money to determine whether or not they're going to possibly pay down the debt in the state, do this, that, and the other. But when I tell you plain and simple, because I want people, people have a really short attention span. So when
Hmm.
you're talking about this constitutional amendment number 2, all you really need to know when you go vote on Saturday, this is not a teacher pay raise. It is not designed for that purpose, period.
All right. Amendment number 3. Now, amendment number 3 is really important. This amendment would allow the legislature to expand the list of juvenile crimes um, that could be prosecuted in an adult court. What are some of the legal and ethical concerns surrounding this proposal?
Well, first of all, we need to treat children as children
Mm.
because that's what they are. Children who are accused of serious crimes, if the crime is serious enough, they already get transferred to adult court. Here, we're talking about misdemeanors, first time offenders, nonviolent crimes. Why in the world would you vote for something to send your child who may have broken a window, the neighbor's window, to an adult court? Children are children and they should be treated as such. When you when you engage in a system where you place children around adults who've committed adult crimes, who are in jail for whatever length of time they're in there, you can't expect anything but bad things to happen in the way of behaviors, in the way of learned bad behavior, because that's the environment you're placing those children in. So, why in the world would you want to advocate for more crimes that children commit that are not serious crimes, by the way? Keep in mind, we're talking about nonviolent first time offenders, sending them to adult courts. 17-year-olds, according to the last session, are already treated as adults. Well, you don't need me to tell you, and I don't need you to tell me. When you were 17, were you an adult? Your behavior was not adult like. When you were 21, were you an adult?
When I was on the yard
That
down in Southern.
exactly. What was your behavior adult like? Probably not. Okay. We have some 30-year-olds who are not adult like. Okay. But I say all that to make a point. We laugh about that because we know we were children at one time and children need to be treated as such. So when you're talking about taking nonviolent first time offenders and sending them to adult court, no, we're here to protect children. That's what adults should be worried about. How do we protect children? That's not the way to do it. So no, you vote no on that. You don't want to send kids 17 and under for non-violent crimes for acting as children, because children will be children and they will do things that we as adults would not do because they just don't think and process like we do. They don't need to be in adult court. No.
I'm gonna go off a tangent a little bit
Yes.
again on this one because one of the things I can get the idea of being tough with the crime. But another thing, again, you and I were just talking about a few seconds ago, was we do a piss poor job of beginning to educate the public on what these new crimes are. And so, a lot of times, we say that people ought to just inherently know what's right and what's wrong. But if we also don't go on a crusade to say, you know, if you do X, you're going to be charged accordingly. And then over the weekend, you had a couple of 17-year-olds, one in particular that was charged because they had porn on, and I think this was child porn on on probably on their device. Again, I'm not suggesting that it's okay or anything like that, but it also it becomes important for us as a society to make sure that these young people know what's legal and what's not legal, and that's something that's real part. And again, I don't think we do a real good job of making sure that people know what these things are. Not that if they go do something wrong, I think you know, if I had to have an opinion on it, I think they need to do it. But I also say you ought to convey, especially when you've changed a lot of things. We told everybody that they can conceal a weapon, and I believe in my Second Amendment right. But we did an excellent job at making sure that everybody knew about it. Well, why not do the same thing? If you get out here and you go do X, why not let's put a campaign together to make sure everybody know what the rules of the road are.
And I think that's an excellent idea because I don't even think parents really know.
Oh, mm,
It's difficult. Being a parent today, it's not like being a parent 30, 40 years ago. Things are so different. The challenges that parents face
mhm,
with social media in particular, it's just overwhelming. They can't police their children 24/7. It's
mhm,
not even possible to do that. But at the same time, parents need to be educated so that they can educate their children as to what the rules of the road are, as you say, what
mhm,
what is right, what is wrong, what you can and cannot do, and the things that would get you into serious trouble.
mhm,
Unintended consequences happen all the time. Unintended consequences. You did this, but you find yourself in that trouble. That's a problem. That is just a huge problem.
And then certainly if you don't have the resources, and you when you look at right here in Alexandria specifically, and you look at the sheer amount of poverty here, a hell of a lot of people here don't have access to those resources to go tap into quality, legal representation.
Absolutely.
And so there again, you see an imbalance there on what's happening legally. Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just go ahead and go on to the next. Expedite. Going on to constitutional amendment number 4,
Hmm.
expediting special elections for judicial vacancies. Amendment 4 proposes holding special elections for Louisiana Supreme Court vacancies sooner than the current 12-month requirement. Why is this change being considered?
I haven't the
And
faintest idea. I truly don't have a clue. I don't see the need to make it any sooner than the 12-month requirement that we already have. It's not going to better the system. It's not going to do anything more than what we already have. So when amendments are proposed like this, you have to ask yourself why. What is the real purpose? And sometimes the real purpose is hidden from us. It truly is. Unless you're digging in the weeds, you might not know the real purpose until after you voted, and there it is. And voila, all of a sudden it pops up. But
Mhm.
things have been working this way for a while regarding this 12-month requirement to fill a vacancy. I just don't understand, and it hasn't been pointed out to me, the need to change what we currently have and how it would better. So when you ask me what impact would it have on the judicial system, good question. Don't know. I don't see anything different happening if you lower the requirement for 12 months. Just give the system some flexibility to maybe call a special election if it needs to. That solves your problem right there. But you don't need to change the whole requirement. You can call a special election to fill a seat. We're fine with that. But you don't need to, I just don't see the need for expediting special elections for judicial vacancies. No, sometimes we need to sit back and see who's going to enter those races and why they're entering,
Mhm.
what platform they're pushing.
Mhm.
I think we need to take our time sometimes. We're in a rush to do a lot of things. Sometimes it's just good to take a breather and to see
Mhm.
how things pan out.
Right, 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 right. Many people don't pay attention to these constitutional amendments on the ballot, and we kind of
Not at
talked.
all.
What advice do you have for that voter that's out there, Ms. Fuller, that will help them make an informed decision on Saturday?
Well, first of all, first thing you need to always know, you need to know that an election is occurring,
Hmm.
number one, which means you have to pay attention.
Right.
Because I can assure you, this March 29th election, I
Hmm.
cannot count the people that I have talked to when I ask, have you voted early or are you waiting to vote until the 29th? And they're saying, for what? No clue that there was even an election going on.
That's right.
Now, they may have heard vaguely about the clerk of court race, but the constitutional amendments, I assure you, they have no idea. And when you go to the courthouse, for instance, and they place the amendments on the wall for you to read, and it's pages and pages and pages. In reality, who you think is going to read that? No one.
No one.
So, generally, what I do, I go to the Louisiana elections website and I get me a breakdown of what's being proposed. And even me as a lawyer, I read that stuff more than once, two, three, four times to make sure I get the gist of what is being proposed. Because if you do a cursory reading, most of us, it doesn't matter how smart we think we are, how educated we think we are, you don't get it the first couple of times because you don't get down in the weeds of it because they don't explain what's in between the weeds.
Hmm.
So If you're not an informed person, that's just not who you want to be in today's society. You have to make it your business to know what's going on in order to protect you and your family, in order to protect yourself, in order to protect your rights. So I would ask that stop with the complacency. Stop with thinking that other people are going to look out for you.
Mm.
Stop with thinking that other people will protect your rights. No, we have backtracked so far from the fight that occurred in the early 50s and the 60s. And folks are not paying attention. If you don't pay attention, you're going to lose ground and you might find yourself, dare I say it, you might find yourself being a Kunta Kinte at some point because you simply were not paying attention to the things that we are losing on a daily basis.
Mm. So I'm gonna ask you one last time here. Where can one, if somebody's watching this show right now and they just want to get out there and go read this stuff for themselves, where can they go?
Go to the website, go to the Secretary of State website, go to the election website. It'll have all this stuff for you. That's what the Election Commission does. They
Hmm.
break all this stuff down, but you have to take the time to read it. What I generally do, I go and I print it out first, and then I do a reading. I do my cursory reading before an election, and then I do my deep dive to make sure. And I dive deep enough to where I can explain it to Jane or John, who's not going to do that.
Hmm.
I try to have myself informed enough to be able to tell other folks, this is what's really going on.
Okay. All right. Ms. Fuller, do you have anything, if was it anything that we didn't cover that you might want to let our audience know about, regarding this upcoming election?
The way that I would like to think about our community is that we have the skills, we have the folks, we have the wherewithal to make change. It's just up to do it. I believe in hope. I believe that people care. I believe sometimes they don't know where to go to express it. And I don't want anyone to feel like all hope is lost and that you're the only one who may be caring about a particular situation. I don't believe that. There are like minded folk out there. You just be willing to reach out and to allow yourself to become part of the larger picture of the care community. Go to
Hmm.
your city council meetings,
Mm.
go to your police bureau meetings, log into shows like yours,
Hmm.
read your social media, but do it all on a productive measure. Let's not get involved in the nitpicky things that people generally find themselves involved in. Just become an aware citizen and make it your business. Make it your business to always be a voter because folks died and bled for your right to vote.
That being said, there, Ms. Fuller, I want to thank you for joining us tonight and helping us to break down these important amendments. These decisions will shape Louisiana's future, um, definitely, one way or the other. And it's vital that everyone understands what they are voting for on
And vote
Saturday.
no on all four of them. The vote should be no on all four of them. But please educate yourself. If you want to vote yes, make sure you have a good reason to vote yes.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you to go vote. But these are just not things that benefit us in any shape, form, or fashion. And I don't want to step out of line to tell people how to vote. I know what my vote would be. I don't see the benefit of any of this for us.
Okay. To our viewers out there, your vote matters. Make
It
sure
does.
you're ready to vote on Saturday. And of course, we're going to be reminding you the remainder of the week by doing your research and spreading the word. If you found tonight's discussion valuable, hit that like button, share this broadcast, and drop a comment about your thoughts. I guess people who are sitting out there listening ain't had no questions. so, but just in case they have, I know I got your number. I'm gonna text you for the answer.
Not a problem.
Before we wrap this up, I definitely want to say a big shout out and a big thank you to um, our business partners out there, Sadler's Towing, Long's Products, and Legendary Kung Fu and Tai Chi. Your contributions over here to us help us to make sure that the community is informed about these really important things that are going on. And most importantly, go out and vote on this Saturday, March the 29th. And there's one other thing. On Wednesday night, we have been invited, the Rapides Parish Police Jury has selected the Rapides Parish Ambulance Support Committee recommended, Pafford Medical Services as the sole provider for Rapides Parish. And there is a police jury meeting on Thursday, so I want everybody to know that. But also on Wednesday evening, we are inviting Pafford to come tell us about their company, tell us about what they can do and different things of that nature. So for you guys who are still listening with us and the ones that are going to come on, we will be interviewing Pafford on Wednesday evening, and we look forward to having you guys join us and asking questions if you have them. Again, Ms. Fuller, I want to thank you so much for coming on and spending a little time with us this evening.
Thank you. Go vote, folks. Go vote.
All right. If you just hang in there, Ms. Fuller, I'm going to end the stream.
Thank you.